Hello, my name is John, and today we'll be reading from the Gyeong, chapter 4, The God Who Needs Liberation, by Reverend Myung. God, who created all things, poured his utmost love into the creation of human beings. God invested his sincere heart into the creation of human beings more than anything else he had created in the preceding 5 days, so that they would manifest his glory and his hope. He wanted human beings to grow up and fulfill his hope, to sing with joy and establish a peaceful family with whom he could dwell. Prior to the fall, God was delighted with original Adam and Eve, his creations. God watched them grow with a heart of sincere anticipation, waiting for the time when his great hope would come to glorious fruition in them. As he surveyed his creation, God thought, "I am pleased with all the things I made for you, Adam and Eve. Yes, I am even more pleased to look at you who will govern all these things." Such were the heart and mind of their heavenly parent for Adam and Eve. They were indeed the central beings. God placed his cherished hope in them, for they were the foundation of his happiness. Moreover, they were essential to the whole created world. They should never have experienced the world for which God had such hope. This is truly something to lament and regret. Since it was our first ancestors who committed the fall, it was natural that they would suffer sorrow. But the fall brought sorrow even to God, who had created them with such great hope. That is, when human beings fell into sorrow, they wronged God and brought him to a miserable and painful state. This should never have happened on the earth. It should never have occurred under the sun. Nevertheless, the mistake of our first ancestors led to the unimaginable incident that we call the fall. Why is God the God of sorrow? God's ideal of creation should have brought him boundless joy and delight in the garden of love, based on his love and truth. But God's joy was frustrated as a result of the fall of Adam and Eve, and he has had to toil in history for thousands of years. You need to experience the sorrowful heart of God, who suffers to this day even as he fights Satan in order to fulfill the ideal of creation, which Adam and Eve did not fulfill due to the fall. You must also experience God's intense grief at the loss of Adam and Eve, when they betrayed him and fell. Unless you first understand what God's love is all about and experience how much God loves human beings, you can never fathom the depth of his sorrow upon losing them. God was supposed to have emerged as a glorious being. Our joy should have been God's joy, and God's joy should have been our joy. This would have been the ideal of creation, but due to the fall, that ideal was lost, and God ended up miserable. The God who appears to us is not the God of glory. He is incomparably more wretched and deserving of pity than anyone in all of history. God originally should have been the God of glory, but since the day of the fall, his situation has been the opposite. God should have been able to entrust everything to human beings, and we should have been able to entrust everything to God. But this sort of open relationship with God became impossible. How deeply painful it is for the parents if their children see them in deep misery. Accordingly, God does not want to reveal his painful heart and situation to his children. Though he is toiling endlessly, he does not want to show his sad face. To this day, we human beings have thought of God as a God of glory, not the God of suffering or pain. Many religions in history have taught this, and believers have led their lives of faith with this idea. But the truth is that we have thought that once we meet our Father, all our pain and suffering will be dissolved and all our wishes fulfilled. However, when I came to meet our Heavenly Parent, after seeking Him for so long, I discovered that everything He owns, His children, His property, His nation, and His world was lost. Our Father is in that kind of situation. We have thought that once we meet our Father, all our pain and suffering will be dissolved and all our wishes fulfilled. However, when I came to meet our Heavenly Parent after seeking Him for so long, I discovered that everything He owns, His children, His property, even the whole world, was in the hands of the enemy. You must become filial sons and daughters who can attend the God who has suffered in sorrow throughout history, who can comfort Him and offer Him joy and glory. Even now God laments in disappointment. Hence you must reach the point where you can welcome the day of God's victory. And not only you, but all humankind with you. To comfort God's heart of bitter sorrow, you must attend Him beyond your own people and beyond the world, to advance with the full authority of the cosmos. You need to devote yourselves to becoming children of God, whom God wants to bless rather than judge. You have to become a group of people who can endure, no matter what cruel situations or adverse circumstances you suffer. You should be able to say, even if no one else remains, I will survive. Only with this kind of heart can you connect your life to God. If you have this kind of relationship with God, even though strong winds and mighty storms may come against you, nothing can destroy that bond of heart, which holds the power of life. God is not seated upon a throne, receiving praise and glory. Instead, God is weeping bitterly every day as He works to save fallen human beings. This has long been God's situation, even as He guides humankind. God is in such pain as He tries to save people from the pit of misery into which they have fallen, to waken them shouting, "Come, come unto me." But even though God does all that, He cannot force people to come to Him. We must fulfill our portion of responsibility. God cannot do our part for us, though He may want to. How difficult this is for God. God is the Lord of sorrow and the Lord of pain. Our Father, whom we are supposed to attend, wants to experience joy and glory, yet He has never had the chance. God is in bitter sorrow due to the fall. Yet He carries still more grief and suffering. We think that heaven is a garden of happiness, but in reality that is not the case. I have thoroughly searched in every corner looking for anything to rejoice over, but I could not find anything. God is supposed to have the power and authority to rule the world. He is supposed to experience glory and honor and sing in happiness. Yet the elements of joy, glory, and goodness are all gone, while all that remains are sorrow and pain. This is God's lament in heaven and on earth. There is no greater suffering than this. God is the most sorrowful being. He is more sorrowful than a son who weeps in front of his dying mother. He has been treated more unjustly than a person wrongfully sentenced to death as a traitor to his people, when they should have recognized him as a champion of goodness. God is a Lord who holds the title as the most wronged and most miserable. Religion should be teaching this to the point that people's hearts are deeply moved. God does not wear a robe of glory. His robe is soaked in blood and sweat. That robe was made by the bloody hands of sons and daughters who desperately tried to hold onto Him but could not. God's feet are scarred from walking the thorny paths of His children's struggles throughout history. When individuals sought Him and fell down on the way, God took the blows on their behalf. He chose one people even as other peoples fell away, but when even that people betrayed Him, He allowed Himself to be struck on their behalf in order to continue the fight. The God in whom we have believed is, in fact, a being deserving of sympathy. The God who deserves sympathy. God exists in a state of confinement. He has been living with a painful heart as the parent who long ago lost his only children, his son and daughter, Adam and Eve. He is a God of bitter sorrow. He has been endlessly shedding tears, beating his chest. God, while following after human beings, has experienced countless deaths. He has endured this over and over again, even to this day. There are so many nails driven into his heart that they could cover the whole world. Nowhere in the world can there be found a sorrow as profound as his. God is the Lord of the world, but he has never been able to wield his authority as the Lord. He is a subject partner of love, but he has never been able to say to us, I love you. Even though he is in the position to own everything, he cannot say to us, you are mine, and hold us as he wishes. Among the countless human beings on earth, God never had his own son or daughter, not even one brave soldier, who could totally defeat Satan. Even though there are countless Christians on earth who believe in Jesus, among them God has not had even one commander-in-chief who could order a total offensive against Satan. God tried to relate to the earth by having Jesus give orders to the angelic world, but this did not succeed. God also gave a vision for the ideal of the bride to the people on earth and searched everywhere for her. Yet he never met even one such woman whom he could proudly present before Satan. Indeed, as a group of people, we ought to feel deeply repentant before God. God is a being who truly deserves sympathy. God is the difficult portion of being mistreated, torn, wounded, and cornered. He weeps bitterly. His heart is scarred and broken in pieces. His heart was in pain and desperation each time he raised up a people, only to have them fall away. God carries bitter sorrow in his heart because of the fall. The twists and turns in God's story of relating with human beings are beyond description. He is out of breath, running after people and trying to save them. How miserable God is. Even a beggar on earth is better off. For God, this is what it has come to. If God could simply sit on a throne and order everyone in heaven and earth to do as he wished, why then has he struggled to deal with sinful humankind for the past 6,000 years? Truly, God is the most deserving of sympathy. He is a Lord of all and our Father, yet he could never assume those roles. Nothing could be more frustrating. Although God created everything, he could not do as he pleased with his creation. He never could call us his sons and daughters, even though we were created as such. God has led his providence for 6,000 years in order to break down these walls. Of all the beings in this world, none is more deserving of sympathy than God. God has labored harder than anyone. He is a king of hard work. From the moment God created human beings, he had to relate with them, even if he did not want to face them. God could not avoid this destiny. Because he is their Father, throughout history, God has struggled to relate with human beings. For 6,000 years, he has been unable to separate from them, even for 1 second. At the same time, God has to relate to people who believe that he destined them to a life of screaming and moaning. How miserable does that make God? God has been the God of sorrow throughout history. In every age, God was sorrowful in the past and remains so in the present. Those who do not recognize and respond to our grieving God will face judgment. If you truly love God, how can you ask him to take away your pain and sorrow? God has taken responsibility for all the pain and sorrow throughout history, and we should feel indebted and grateful that he has done so. Yet without recognizing this fact, we bring our own pain and sadness to God. For this we are bound to face judgment. God will recognize the person who weeps alone over his or her own sorrow, unable to pray to God about such personal pain, knowing that God has already endured so much pain and sorrow through all the ages of history. We must be the sons and daughters who can say, God, your pain is so great compared to mine. I will manage my own situation. Please let me do your work, even if I have to face death. If you constantly ask God for blessings, you will not be able to raise your head before God. You are a sinner who cannot lift your head in front of God. God, the internal being, shed tears for us. His tears are to eliminate the way of death, the way of pain, and the way of sorrow. God sheds tears to eliminate all these paths. We need to understand that God is shedding blood, sweat, and tears for us to eliminate the ways of sorrow, pain, and death. Then it is only right that we take His will upon our shoulders so that He does not have to keep going to the point of death on our behalf. Thus far, God has placed our ancestors in positions where they had to shed tears, shed their blood, and sweat, and confront death. It was not because God had no love that He did this. He did so in order to ultimately eliminate such situations. Yet God Himself experienced much greater suffering than they. How painful it is for a father and mother to see the death of their beloved child. How their heart is grieved to watch their child suffer. It is more painful than if they were to die themselves. With such a painful heart, God has been suffering throughout human history. We may have to endure pain, but it is just within our one generation. Then we are done with our responsibility. But God had to endure that kind of indescribable pain. Every time our ancestors went the way of death, the way of tears, the way of blood and sweat, and the way of sorrow and suffering. This video is a production of the School of the White Crane. My name is John Brooker, and you can reach me through commentary on this video or through my Gmail listed here. Please share this video with family and friends and on social media. May God richly bless you, my beloved.